and Sophie in the photo booth.
About what?
You and Sophie in the photo booth.
In the what? In the photo, but the photo booth was off.
Why were you in there?
That's just where we ended up arguing. I just told you the photo booth was off.
So why were you in it if it's not working?
I just told you we was arguing in there.
Why?
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates Anyabwile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today I'm going to be breaking down everything that we saw unfold between Katisha, Javen, and Demola on Love is Blind UK Season 2. If you're curious, stay tuned.
What's on your mind?
Before we jump into the video, I want to talk with you about one of the world's top language learning apps, which is Babbel. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, 2 years of Spanish in college, but it wasn't until Babbel where I felt like it really started sinking in. They take a very pragmatic and practical approach to teaching language, and I really love that. I'm learning phrases and words that I actually use. For me, I predominantly am trying to learn Spanish for when we're traveling. My husband and I travel to a lot of predominantly Spanish-speaking countries. Now I finally feel like I'm able to communicate enough for us to be able to navigate a lot easier. My long-term goal is to be able to provide Spanish services to clients. And the great thing about Babbel, you can learn a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And they also offer a 20-day money-back guarantee. So that means if you're getting to the end of that 3 weeks and you're not grasping the language in the way that you thought you'd be able to, you can get your money back, so you have nothing to lose. Again, if you'd like to try Babbel, please use the link in my description box for 55% off, and let me know what language you're interested in learning in the comments. Now let's get back to the video. There will be spoilers. If you haven't seen the season all the way through to the reunion, you may want to finish that and come back. Also, please know I don't know any of these people, right? So everything that I am breaking down is based off of an edited produced show. There are moments that we don't see, there are moments that might be referenced a lot, and there are other perspectives that we might miss out on when we're talking about these people. So I cannot provide them with any diagnoses, and nothing I say is final. Any new information could change any of our perspectives, so please always keep that in mind. Let's start with the pods. Okay, so when we started talking about Javen, Katisha, and Demola, a lot of people were very frustrated with Katisha's choice of Javen over Demola. And for me, I understood why she chose him. I'm not saying it was the right choice, but today we're going to talk about why, and we're going to talk about how these things play out all the time in my practice. I see these sort of choices being made every day, and it is a very difficult cycle to break. The first thing that caught my attention about Javen is that he referred to himself as a charmer and says that he's never had to compete for women.
I've been single my whole life. I've never had like a serious long-term relationship. I'm a charmer. I don't find it difficult to date multiple women.
For a lot of people, that immediately read as player or someone who might be egotistical. I think that what I took from that is that if he were to be in a position where he would have to put his best foot forward to win someone's heart, that he was not going to do what he could to lock down the person that he wanted. It seems like his strategy overall with dating has been nonchalant. So he makes it so that he doesn't put in a lot of effort, and that is what has worked well for him historically. And as we see, that did also turn in his favor in this show. The first thing that I learned about Katisha that struck me was that she's the oldest of 7. Now, with her being the oldest and also being an oldest daughter specifically of so many kids, you do learn really quickly not to put yourself first. And I was curious if this was going to impact her journey, and I think that it did, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the love triangle. She also goes on to talk about her history with dating, which is that she's typically dated men who she describes as emotionally unavailable.
I've had like people not treat me very well, and I would say I probably had a particular type. I feel like I go for a very emotionally unavailable man.
He's been cheated on a lot, and she said that she has a history of constantly forgiving and accepting them back into her life. This wasn't surprising to me with her being the oldest of 7. You do get accustomed to putting your own needs last. So when a person presents you with a problem, something that can make your life more difficult, she's constantly been in the position of adjusting and readjusting to other people's needs, it sounds like, throughout her life. So that's not going to be difficult for her to have empathy for someone who was acting out, for her to try to do what she can to nurture and care for them. These are traits that typically come with the person who is the oldest, but also specifically being the oldest of 7 means that she's had to readjust her life many, many times. Something that she says later on when she was explaining why she ended up choosing Javen over Demola is she tells Ashley that her life has been so chaotic.
My whole life has been very sorry. Come in.
And this is one of the first times that we really see her getting emotional. And a person who has a very chaotic life often is chasing peace, but sometimes we confuse a person who might be emotionally unavailable or more specifically avoidantly attached. If they're very avoidant, sometimes we confuse that with peace, right? Because they're not all up on me, they're not making me uncomfortable, they're not forcing me to make decisions about this relationship. And it makes it feel like this is a much easier, smoother process. And this is why we often see people who are anxiously attached connecting with people who are avoidantly attached. I'll say that I didn't see enough from Katisha to say that she is anxiously attached, but I do think that we saw enough from Javen to speculate that he may be avoidantly attached. I actually thought that Katisha could possibly be avoidant as well. She may also have disorganized attachment, which is something that is often connected with traumatic history. But because we don't learn a ton about her background, I really can't confidently comment on her attachment at all. Then we see Katisha and her connection with Demola. With him, it felt like there was more conversations about who they were as people. They connected about their grandmothers. He seemed a little bit more interested in her history, who she is, what she wants in a relationship. And very quickly, Demola makes it clear that Katisha is his number 1.
There are flowers in here. They're from you.
Yes, they're for me.
So he tells her that, and you can almost see in the moment that she is very happy to hear that. At the same time, you can see that she's struggling with it. And she ends up talking with the girls in the lounge, and she says, how can he be so set on me?
But I don't know if I'm putting my walls up because it seems too perfect, like too good to be true. Do you know what it is? I'm like, how can you be so set on me?
She becomes quite emotional then as well, talking about how she's unclear on what would make him so sure about her, which tells you that in a way she really distrusts adoration, which made her distrust almost Demola's intentions. So I think that in her gut she knew that he was being honest, that he cared about her, that he really wanted to move forward with her, but there was also a lack of familiarity with feeling this way and with someone being so intentional with her, and it was making her uncomfortable. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that she made the right decision, but what I am saying is that it makes sense. When I'm working with my clients, my focus isn't on telling them if they're making the right or wrong decisions. My focus is on helping them understand why they're making the choices that they're making. And if they don't like those choices, then we can talk about things to think about to help speak down to maybe those intrusive thoughts or to address their own self-perception that is leading to choices that they're not proud of. So what we can see there is that for Katisha, she doesn't really feel worthy of adoration. And I thought that it was very interesting that somehow Demola actually picked up on that, because you have to keep in mind a lot of these conversations we're seeing, but the other person isn't seeing. And I'm not sure if maybe they did have a conversation where she told him that she doesn't feel worthy, but it's not something that we saw. But he does tell her,
you deserve it all, and don't think that it's something that you shouldn't deserve.
Thank you.
Logically, she knows that's true. There was a big part of her that really just couldn't trust that. It was way too unfamiliar. And I thought what was interesting too, while all of this was happening with the triangle, you could see that Demola was actually very stressed about it. He wanted to make sure that it was clear to her that she is his priority and that he wants her to know that he's not interested in anyone else. On the other side, you have Javen, who it seemed the way that he was talking, like he viewed himself as the prize. He told her outright that I don't feel like it's necessary for me to do a lot of gestures.
Probably haven't made too many grand gestures, I guess, but that's not me. That's probably not how I communicate, so.
He tells her these things when she's basically telling him, like, I have another connection and this other guy's putting in a lot of effort.
The thing is that I know where I stand with him. I feel that's why I feel that I don't know where I stand with you. Like, he's been making like grand gestures. The way that you express how you feel is obviously very different.
What she was really saying is, this other guy who I'm less interested in because this is a less familiar situation, he is making it clear that he wants me. I really want that from you. You're really my top, but you haven't made it clear to me that I'm yours. That's what she's telling him. And he's basically saying like, okay, the other guy's doing the most. I hate it when Javen went back to the lounge and was talking to the other guys and said loudly in front of Demola that, you know, she's basically saying the guys love bombing her.
He was like, the other person's making like really big grand gestures, like love bombing her.
Love bombing, he said.
So that lets you know he takes any sort of effort or intentionality to make it clear to a person that you want to be with them early on as love bombing. And it's interesting these days how that conversation is so in the forefront, and there's a lot of confusion about what love bombing is. But the thing with love bombing is that it's very, very challenging to know when somebody is love bombing in the beginning. You really have to see it all the way through and see if their behavior changes, if that same intention they were showing in the beginning, if the love they were showing in the beginning, if it dwindles, goes away, and a lot of times completely changes to where this person is now being cruel or absent. These are the things that really show you that a person is love bombing. Unfortunately, just because a person's being really nice in the beginning doesn't tell us that they're love bombing us. They might actually genuinely care and want to show us how much they do. But for Javen, when we get to this conversation around the triangles, he also said it's all a part of the game.
It's all part of the game.
That to me was further signifying that he wasn't really looking at this experiment or this process as a way of solidifying a wife. To me, it just means that he looked at this as a game. I just thought that that choice of words, and I know sometimes we get caught up in semantics, but sometimes words tell us a lot. And as a therapist, I have to pay a lot of attention to language choice. And to say it's all a part of the game to me signified how unseriously he was taking this process. So most people knew what was happening. A lot of us found it very relatable as Katisha was moving forward with Javen. You could see how much she wanted him to be the one. She wanted him to put in the most bare minimum effort. And for a long time, he was absolutely refusing to do that. And so she tells Demola, you know, I've made the decision to move forward with you. And she even says, and I'm not going to change my mind.
I know you've got the next date.
Don't worry, nothing's gonna change.
Say that again?
Nothing's gonna change.
Okay, I love that.
I feel confident in my decision.
Now, whenever a person feels a need to say something like that unprovoked, usually I question if this is something more that they're saying for their self than for their audience. In that moment, when she says, I'm not going to change my mind, unprovoked, it made me question if she was trying to tell herself in like a self-soothing way, don't change your mind. Don't change your mind. This is the right decision. Don't go back, because she could feel it as well. She could feel that she was being pulled in a more familiar direction. Here is the thing. When you come from a background of being in emotionally abusive, even physically abusive relationships, there is a familiarity that is comforting because it's predictable. You know what's coming next. You're familiar with the cycle. And when someone is trying to do something to break you out of that cycle, I even see it in therapy. Sometimes I'll literally pull out the chart with the cycle of abuse and say, does this look familiar? When someone is pulling those things out and pointing it out to you or trying to change that cycle and disrupt it, there's resistance because we have a status quo. We have a sense of homeostasis, right? If you remember like 7th grade environmental science, homeostasis is we have a pattern, we have something established, something we're used to. And when we break away from that, that unpredictability can lead to a lot of anxiety. I'm just not sure about this. I have no identity within this system. And so for Katisha, the situation with Demola was just very, very new and different. And we have to also just talk about the importance of the attraction. So I know a lot of people are like, she should have chosen Demola, she shouldn't have chosen Javen. And I know that Katisha stands by our connection was genuine. But if you listen to some of the things she's saying, like she refers to him as cute, for example.
Oh, you're just adorable.
Those are things she probably says to her little brothers and sisters, like, you're cute, you're adorable. different things like that, where I don't think that she really felt a romantic connection with him. And that's just my take. I know she says that she does, but I think sometimes when you're in this pod situation, like, you have to say that. Who's ever gonna say our connection wasn't real? Because then you seem like a fraud and you seem like you stole someone's experience from them because you didn't tell them outright that you really weren't that interested. But I think that because Demola was so outside of her comfort zone, I don't think she really ever saw him as a romantic partner. You know, there was a question at the reunion, like, how do you think it would have played out had she moved forward with you? And they were talking to Demola. My perspective on that is that I think that we would have seen a very sad story play out, where he's constantly bidding for her affection and trying to be loving toward her and to show her how much he cares and builds. And I think that we would have seen her being the Javen of the situation, being very nonchalant, pulling back, feeling uncomfortable, feeling awkward. I think that would have been a lot harder for her to hide in the real world than it was behind the wall, where we could see her facial expressions and gestures that really indicated a level of discomfort that he couldn't see. The thing is that Katisha says she's never been put first. And so when you've never been put first, which makes sense, she was functioning as, I'm assuming, a secondary parent to her siblings. And there might be other reasons, you know, like her past relationships and things like that. But when you are in that position and someone is putting you first, it doesn't feel genuine because it's so unnatural to you. Javen instead made her work for it, made her try to earn his love. He literally says at one point that if, at this point, if she wants us to get engaged, she's gonna have to propose.
She's gonna have to propose to me.
And you know, you might take that as a joke, but he said it more than once. And that's just how many times it made it into the final edit. We see him say that twice.
If anything were to move forward, she would have to propose to me.
And so for Javen, I want to also take a moment to kind of empathize with him as well, because I think that for him, he might struggle with showing emotions. He talks about being in a position where he did try to be vulnerable in a relationship.
Yeah, I was seeing someone for a little while, probably around like 10 months or so. That was probably the first time I was like really vulnerable with someone. I was really like giving it 100%, and I didn't feel like I was getting back that 100%.
And I know that seems like, you know, oh my gosh, that's such a tired excuse. But for him, if it's a real challenge, that could be a very emotionally traumatic experience. And that's the thing about vulnerability, is that's what it's all about. Vulnerability isn't about opening up in a safe space. Vulnerability is about taking a risk and being open when you really don't know how well you're going to be received, how much you're going to be comforted or loved on, right? That's what vulnerability is about. It's about risk. You're vulnerable to pain, you're vulnerable to harm. So for him, he learned that being vulnerable is not something that is safe for him. And when we fast forward and we even meet his family, his sister says,
he will smile come rain or shine. If he's angry, he smiles.
His first reaction is to smile. And that is obviously a defense mechanism. It's a mask to help shield anyone from being able to see how he's actually feeling. That's his guard. That's how he protects himself. So Javen is also scared of being hurt. He's scared of pain. And when he did what a lot of people would probably consider the bare minimum, getting her flowers, right? It wasn't anything sentimental, anything that really showed her who he is. It was just, you know, a gesture because she asked for a gesture. Some people might look at it as like throwing her a bone, but you know, for that to be the date where she basically told him that she was going to move forward with Demola, for him, that was him being vulnerable, putting himself out there. And even if it's just a little bit, that rejection is what made him feel like, I can't even propose to this person. And that whole situation really set the stage, because you had two hurt people, two people terrified of being hurt, engaging and being unwilling to be open with one another so that they could actually form a solid bond. So they were both just playing it safe. It made it so that they were never able to truly connect. For Javen, he was never really able to get over the whole Demola situation because they were friends, they shared friends, and it felt like if she could change her mind after she'd been so sure with Demola, how could he be confident that she wouldn't change her mind again about him? So if that was a possibility, why would he open up? This person who's become so good at guarding himself, he did not feel safe enough to do that. And I think that that was fair. It wasn't the right choice if you're actually trying to build a solid connection. But again, I think it makes sense. For Katisha, she was dealing with so much guilt about the situation with Demola that she said she felt like such a bad person. And when we make decisions that we're not proud of, it really helps us excuse when people treat us poorly, because it furthers the belief that I'm not worthy of being treated well. I have these conversations with my clients all the time. They'll get into an argument with the partner, for example, and let's say the partner really took it there. They're really obviously abusing, hurting them, but maybe they say something in retaliation. They say, hey, we both have things to work on. We both aren't perfect in this relationship. I hear that a lot. And I say the thing is not about perfection. What we're really looking at is safety. Are you emotionally safe in your relationship? Are you physically safe? If not, it makes sense not to be in that relationship because neither one of you may be getting that. Instead of, well, their wrongs cancel out my wrongs and my wrongs cancel out their wrongs, so we should just stay together. What you're telling me is that this relationship is bringing out a dynamic that's making both of you feel unsafe, both of you be your worst selves. It doesn't make sense to stay in a relationship where you're not able to grow and evolve. It feels like the relationship has a very toxic dynamic. I am a person who will advocate for ending the relationship. And that's because it can be very, very hard when you have pre-established patterns in a relationship. It can be very hard to change those patterns. It's not impossible, not always, but it can be very challenging. And sometimes it's easier to end things and focus on yourself, and then from a more healed place connect with the person, or to get with the person who's in a more healed place who can help you work on your healing process. But two people who are in pain and are afraid of being hurt further, it's going to be a very difficult atmosphere to grow and evolve in. Katisha does tell us that Javen is her typical type, and so obviously a lot of us are like, be careful girl, that's why you're here, right? It hasn't really worked out, your typical type. And I thought that some of the things that made that clear is that when they were having conversations and Katisha would try to engage in emotional conversations, I mean, we're still in the pods here, it seemed like Javen was very, very interested in talking more about sex.
On the sexual side, do you feel like you have any requirements per se? You feel like, okay, you know, in a thriving relationship, I want to be active every day, once a day, once a week, 2 times a week.
Now, I'm not saying sex is not important to talk about. I'm not saying that's an important factor of a relationship, but I do think that it is secondary to an emotional connection if you're trying to build something solid. It's very rare that you see a person being able to start with having a physical and sexual connection and that build into something emotional. It happens, but it's not the norm. There's a lot of times we're able to have that physical connection and it never, ever, ever evolves into anything emotional. What's more common is starting with the emotional connection and letting that enhance your sexual experience, especially when it comes to female sexual experiences. For a lot of women, they are demisexual, which means that there is a certain requirement for their mind to be stimulated or at least relaxed in order for them to feel sexual arousal. And so being able to build on that emotional connection is extremely important, especially in this context. If Javen wanted to focus on the physical or sexual, that's something that he'd be able to accomplish by just going to a bar. If you were looking to build on a relationship where you'd be able to be in a long-term marriage, that's going to require you all understanding one another and how you typically respond to stress, for example, what your role has been in your family, how you envision your future family to look, and the roles that will take on in that future vision, right? Those are the conversations that are critical to making sure that you're compatible to be married. When Katisha tells Javen that she's moving forward with Demola, his strategy for changing her mind is to read her his notes. And those notes, let's be honest, there was nothing sweet in those notes that for a lot of us would have changed our minds about that decision.
I want to read you my notes for you, that I've written for you, yeah? Katisha, 31, location, Scotland, tick, tick. I don't know why I put 2 ticks, but there must be a reason why I put 2 ticks. Good banter, funny, and cheeky. Sexual chemistry is very important. Tick, tick.
He wrote on his notes again, sexual chemistry. He says that she's cheeky. These aren't things that are necessarily saying this is why I want to spend my life with this person, is it? But for Katisha, because she is accustomed to the bare minimum and not being put first, that little bit of effort was enough confirmation for her to move forward with what felt more comfortable, which was Javen. She just wanted him to do absolutely anything to show her that he wanted to be with her. And that is all it took for her to change her mind, because really that's who she wanted. And she just felt like he didn't want her back. So she was looking for absolutely any sign that he wanted her. When she's describing Javen, she says that he is a dark and mysterious character.
Demola, on one hand, who's very forward with his feelings, and I have Javen, who doesn't really say much. He's this dark, mysterious character.
And that actually reminds me of a comment that someone left when I asked you all which couple you wanted me to talk about first. NH Lex, thank you for commenting. She says, I need somebody to talk about how the Katisha love triangle is a mirror of the Karen love triangle. And Karen is an example of how you choose right by not following the mysterious, emotionally unavailable love. And I thought that comment was so on point, because there is a love triangle between Karen, Megan, and Sophie. And Sophie is the person who wasn't really opening up, and she says in the real world she doesn't have to deal with rejection. I actually do think I'm going to do a video all about Sophie, because there's a lot to unpack with her. But I think the main difference between Karen and Katisha is that Karen never said he had a history of being with unemotionally available women. And so that might be the main difference with them, is that for Karen, he recognized what was happening. He saw that this person is really not opening up and this other person is. And so it was an easier decision for him to make. Whereas Katisha, this is what she's accustomed to. So it was challenging. It's like, do I take a risk and go with this person that is giving me everything I've ever wanted, but at the same time, like, I'm not sure if it's real. I'm not sure how much of a connection there is because I'm not feeling passion. What do I do with this? She was struggling a lot more with that. But for her, instead, because Javen is not only familiar, but it's exciting for her when she talks about this mystery. We have to stop focusing on unwrapping these packages, right? We're so excited to see, like, pulling back the layers. She says at one point, I feel like I see parts of him that other people can't see. You guys, I have to tell you that a lot of the times that is what makes us feel special. I'm getting this version of them that no one else gets. I get to see this part of them that no one else sees. I tell you all often, especially if you're talking about some negative traits, right? I hear often, oh, this person is so mean to everybody but me. That feels good in the moment, but at some point it will turn on you as well. It's very rare that that anger that you see them spewing out at everyone else doesn't at some point turn back on you. And it's the same here, right? If you're looking at him and you're like, everybody else is telling you, girl, he's a red flag, you need to stay away. You're like, well, I just see like a very sensitive part of him, but you're also describing him as mysterious. That means you believe there is this sensitive part to him, but you haven't been able to prove that. You're just hoping that one day you will be able to. We have to stop focusing on what we can reveal in a person and focus on what they're naturally revealing. What has he already shown you? He's already said to you verbatim, for example, I don't think gestures are necessary in here. He's already said to you that he's not going to compete.
I guess on my end, it's like, if I'm not your number one, then that's just the way the cookie crumbles, right? If you're having doubts, I don't want you to be burdened with doubt. Like, you know, I'm cool.
He's already said these things to you. This is what he's actually saying. But what you're doing is reading in between the lines to what you want to hear, which is, okay, you don't believe gestures in here are important, but you do think gestures outside of here are important. So I just haven't been able to experience that side of you yet. We're being taken away with our own illusions of what a life with a person can be like. We fall more in love with the fantasy of a person, fantasy of a relationship, than with the person themselves. You got to pay attention to the evidence. I ask my clients this all the time. What is the evidence? So when you say this is a kind, sensitive person, talk to me about why. What have you learned about this person? What have you seen with your own eyes? What have you heard that tells you this person is kind, that this person is consistent, that this person wants you? what do you actually see? What is the evidence to support these beliefs? That's a very important part of therapy and something I work with my clients on every day. Another thing I want to talk about is how she says he feels like her Mr. Darcy. Now, for those of you who have actually read Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy is not an example of what it looks like to have a person who consistently wants you, who believes in you, who thinks that you're worthy of love. Mr. Darcy started out being pretty elitist. He eventually sees her worth, but it didn't start out that way. And so we have to be very careful about the media depictions as well, because when we are chasing a feeling that we've seen in movies, normally that means we have to start with some heartbreak or start with some conflict, because an easy, healthy love story is boring. So we're really not going to see a ton of depictions of that in the media that's going to get a lot of attention. Even when I do videos on green flags, that gets way less views than if I do a video on red flags, because in general, people are just less interested in looking at positive, healthy dynamics. So if you find yourself saying, oh, this is my Derek Shepherd, this is my Mr. Darcy, this is my Edward Cullen, really think about what that means and if that means that this is a relationship that would be healthy. My last comment about the pods is about how for Katisha, she didn't even want to celebrate her engagement in the lounge. She's like, guys, let's keep it down. It's insensitive.
It's Javen. I don't want to make a big deal.
No,
It's
no,
insensitive.
Yes, but you have to also take in your moment.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Because I know they all do proposals on the same day. I'm not sure if she meant it was insensitive to other people in the lounge who maybe did not get proposed to that day, or if it was going to be insensitive for Demola to see this later. Not really sure about what she meant by that, but it does show that once again, for Katisha, she does not put herself first. She doesn't even want to celebrate her engagement because she doesn't want to be rude or insensitive to other people. Whereas other people are like, girl, I'm excited and I'm going to show that excitement. So I thought that again just really showed us that for her, putting herself first is very, very abnormal. So when they're in Cyprus, Katisha is still pulling to get Javen to open up more to her. I think she's trying to ensure to herself that she was making the right decision. And so she asks him, you know, what was it about me in the pods that made you want to be with me? And these are the answers that always, always, always make it clear whether or not this person is really trying to be married to you. He talks about her having an accent that he wasn't familiar with.
I've never dated anyone with a Scottish accent, so throwing me off. So I was like, Jamaican, Scottish accent. I have no clue.
The confusing accent is what intrigued you enough to stay talking to her? Like, what about who she is or what she was saying? I feel like in these contexts, and I've said this before, you're talking through a wall and there is only so much you can really do to be superficial. And I feel like a person's accent is one of the most superficial things that you can say. Honestly, Cal said something similar. We'll get to a video on Cal and Sorover. We'll get to that. It is also interesting that they were one of the couples who had sex that very first night in Cyprus, and the only ones who are willing to actually talk about it.
We enjoyed each other's company.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
We didn't sleep much.
I think that also says a lot because, like I said, for Javen from the beginning, he seemed to be a lot more interested in a sexual relationship than an emotional connection. And what we see again is that even though I don't believe that Katisha is on the same page about that, she just gave in and gave him what he wanted, which was having sex. And even though she was not getting the things that she wanted, which was more emotional connection. Other people were concerned about the fact that when asked, Javen was already saying, well, if we don't get married, that's not the end of our journey.
I think a big thing for me is like, I definitely want to get married, but I also understand that if it doesn't happen, our journey isn't over.
You're like less than a week in and you're already talking about the possibility of just not getting married and staying together. It does beg the question, why are you on a show that is about getting married quickly? That's the whole premise of the show. And I understand it's a very fast timeline, but if you don't see yourself ever getting married in 6 to 8 weeks, then you shouldn't be on a show like this. I know it's a very quick timeline, but that's the point of the show. We're trying something different to see if you can build a connection with a person and get married to them in such a short time period if we expedite a lot of the getting to know each other process, meeting the family, moving in, planning a wedding, all of those things very quickly? Are you then comfortable to move forward with making a lifelong decision? If he's the kind of person who typically would not do anything like that, then he shouldn't be on this show. And that is my concern when they're choosing people for these shows, especially the men. It's starting to give the casting process is desperate. Like, they're looking for attractive men, which I understand, that are also willing to get married so quickly. And for a lot of these men, the show is approaching them and they're really not asking enough, are you actually open to being married this quickly? And so while we're in Cyprus, that's where we have that conversation with Katisha and Ash, where she says that her whole life has been chaotic and that Javen was moving at a pace she was more comfortable with. That pace was hesitant. She was hesitant, and so that hesitance that he was mirroring is what made her feel more comfortable, whereas Demola was very sure, and that was uncomfortable for her because she was so uncertain, arguably the most uncertain person in the process, because it took her the longest to make a decision. And then later on, as she's recapping that conversation to Javen, she tells him about how she had a conversation with Ash and that she started crying, and his response was, "So she made you cry?"
I ended up getting a bit emotional about it, actually.
So she made you cry.
She made me cry.
So instead of him even being curious about, hey, what made you cry, right? He wasn't even curious about that. He wasn't asking like, oh no, is this something I can help you with? Is there something I can support you with? What would make you so emotional? Because he would have learned more about her, right? He would have learned about the fact that she had a chaotic life, and he could have maybe supported her in understanding more about that. No, he immediately jumped into being defensive.
I hear what they're saying, but you're a grown woman, so you make your own decisions, right? So it don't really matter what they say at the end of the day. Like,
because he's like, oh, well, she's got you crying. Well, I don't hope that you're not allowing another person to make decisions for you, i.e., I hope you're not allowing a person to convince you not to be with me and that you made the wrong choice. So in that moment, I think that he was very much thinking about himself and feeling defensive instead of being curious about what was going on with this person that he's committed to marrying. Mind you, at this point and at no point in this process had either of them ever said that they love each other. They weren't in love. Once they move in, you can see that the thing with Demola is still playing in the back of Javen and Katisha's mind, and Javen encourages her to have a conversation with Demola.
I know we discussed it the other day about Demola and maybe talking to him just so you can clear the air. I think you should definitely have that conversation.
But after he says that, he actually speaks down on it. The text message she's sending him is too long.
Sending him a life story.
No,
What's going on there?
Are you above it and wanting her to talk to him, or are you insecure about it and nervous about her having conversations with him? Be honest. That's what vulnerability is. You know, if he said, you know, I know I'm encouraging you to do this, but I'm just really nervous, honestly, that you're going to have a conversation with him and change your mind. That's vulnerability. We saw nothing like that from them in this relationship. He even tells her right away, like, basically, if you have this fantasy that we're going to be eating dinner together every night, functioning like, you know, a typical married couple, I'm not going to be home. Like, I have to work late.
What are your expectations?
Just kind of aligning our schedules to so that we can eat together.
It's important to you
It's
to eat together.
Yeah, it is.
I need numbers every day.
7 days a week. No, I don't know. Like
2 days a week. Yeah.
However,
I need
what are you going to be
numbers.
doing the other 5 days a week?
I don't know, sometimes I work late.
He's already telling her, I am not invested in adjusting my life in any way to help you live out your dream of what married life or even just being in a couple would look like. He's like, this is the life that I have. You're just going to have to adjust to it. And Katisha does complain about Javen not being vulnerable. But the thing is, this is exactly what he showed you in the pods. This is nothing new. This is something that you knew in the pods and you thought you could change. We have to stop being so curious about mysterious people and what we can do to fix them. We should be looking for people who are invested in doing their own self-work, where we're reaping the benefits of that work. Maybe we can support them in that work, but we're not responsible for it. Then we get to the mixer, where you've got the people from the pod squad coming, the other couples coming. Typically, if there's going to be any mess, this is where we see the mess. And so here we saw that Javen was telling multiple people. He spoke with Yolanda, he spoke with the guys, he spoke with Anu, talking about basically how he wasn't in love. People were asking, how is it going? He was just being coy, not responding, basically indicating that things were not going well.
Are you happy, ready for marriage? Are you feeling it? Okay, said.
I'm gonna be honest, I thought it was interesting that Yolanda heard that from him, but then when she was talking with Katisha, she didn't tell her. I thought they were friends, so I felt like if I was her friend, I would want to say like, hey, he's making it clear to me that he's not really seeing a connection there. Instead, she was kind of giving her a lot of affirmations about the connection and being really positive, so I thought that was odd. But yeah, we see him talking to a lot of people, and the thing that obviously people really focused on was the flirting. Now, people talk a lot about him flirting with Sophie, which was mutual, but I also thought it was odd the conversation he was having with Anu as well. There was even like this, why didn't we talk more in the pod?
Why don't we date more?
Now that I've met you, I've got a different opinion.
You wish we dated a bit more?
I mean, that's the show, isn't it?
Basically says to Anu, you know, if I knew what you look like, then we would have been dating more, but that's the whole point of this experiment. So I just felt that all of that was inappropriate, and maybe I'm a little bit strict. What did you guys think about that? I thought that all of that was inappropriate. And I think the thing that really stood out to me, now of course it can always be editing, but it just seemed like for the most part, they were on opposite sides of the room for most of the night. You have Katisha on one side talking to people, Javen on the other side, whereas the other couples, it seems like they were checking in more, near each other. It just feels like these two were on two different planets. I did think it was interesting when he was talking about being able to see a life with her, but not being in love.
If you can genuinely see the rest of your life with it, but you don't think you're in love yet.
And I think that again, what they were both buying into was the fantasy of one another, the fantasy of a future, the fantasy of marriage, but not the reality and what that requires. It requires you to be emotionally available. It requires you to be vulnerable. It requires you to make adjustments to your life as you're currently living it. All of those things are required for you to have that sort of marriage that you're thinking about. But if you're unwilling to make those compromises, then it's not going to happen. And then we see Katisha's upset about how Javen conducted himself at the mixer. She says she's going to bed and he says he's going out. And so he leaves, he's meeting up with everybody, and Megan ends up talking with Katisha about things that we don't see that happens on camera.
He came later and like I would have expected him to like be with us, but I'm not gonna lie, like he went straight to Sophie. Yeah, and he was chatting to Sophie a lot, and then I watched them get into a photo booth.
What they were taking a photo or just like?
Well, I didn't see any photo.
It's really Megan's word versus Javen's. But the thing is with Javen, a lot of what he was arguing about really boiled down to semantics. He's saying, you know, you're saying I was with them all night. I was only there for 2 or 3 hours.
Apparently, I spent all night with Sophie and Yolanda.
All I ever saw you with was, I saw you with Sophie, Yolanda and Anu.
Would that equate for all night then? Because all night, I was there for about 2 or 3
Well,
hours.
I was enjoying myself.
Okay, you weren't there all night, but the time you were there, you were with the girls a lot of the time. Then we talk about the photo booth situation and how he's saying there wasn't a curtain. They're saying that there was a curtain. The reunion showed that there wasn't a curtain. So what this does show you is that a lot of times our perceptions and memories of things are not crystal clear. But I think that overall, what Megan was saying is that it felt like Javen was being inappropriate and that he wasn't acting as though he was engaged. Based on what was caught on camera, we already know that that was the case. So that's not a far stretch of the imagination, right? And so right now, because there are no cameras following him, he is able to kind of defend himself and say that things are misleading. And maybe there were some things that were said that weren't 100% accurate. But her overall sentiment is, I just don't think that you were conducting yourself in a way that I would want my fiance to conduct himself. And if I'm her friend, I'm going to tell her these things. With Megan, what I liked about that situation is that she's talking with Javen. Kieran does back her up. You know, this is not a video about them, but I thought that, you know, that was important because it is hard to make that decision sometimes to tell somebody bad news because you never know how they're going to receive it. And that might be why Yolanda never told her the things that he was saying to her. It wasn't surprising for a lot of us. And I think, you know, it was just furthering this perspective that a lot of us had that Javen was not really committed to this relationship. Ultimately, we do see Katisha leave and she leaves him a note. And I was actually proud of her for that because she knows herself well enough to know that when she starts talking to him, she starts getting confused. He sees she's leaving, he becomes very elevated. And when he's elevated and trying to change her mind, it works, it's effective because once again, it takes us all the way back to what he was doing, the bare minimum in the pods. It's like, I don't want the feeling of you don't want me and that you're cheating on me. It's a much better feeling that everything's been misconstrued and that you're actually getting upset because you do want to be with me. That's a much more comfortable understanding of the situation. And I think that Katisha knew that if she had another conversation with him, that he was going to convince her to stay, or she would feel bad for leaving. And ultimately, she was able to make that decision and leave in a way that made sense for her. Sometimes we have to be honest and recognize that a conversation is not the best way to make a final decision. In some relationships, our conversations are very unhealthy. We're not heard. It turns into a debate, and we're not able to stand firm on decisions that we know in our gut are the best for us. And in those times, we have to find other ways to get our point across. I'm not really a big advocate for ghosting. I do believe that it is important for a person to understand the why so that they can work on themselves, or just so that they can not have misleading narratives about you. Now, if you feel like these are two things I do not care about and I just want to get out of the situation and not say anything, I have to respect your decision. Whatever makes you feel safe, whatever makes you feel like you're making the right decision. But I think that in most situations, if we were in a position where a lot of us stopped ghosting each other, people will be growing better and maybe getting better for their next relationship, at least, because everybody is left hanging and nobody knows why. Nobody wants to talk to them anymore, and we continue those same patterns or filling in the blanks and just doing things in a way that's furthering everyone's hurt and everyone's scared to actually commit. And so that's me on my soapbox about ghosting once again. If you watch my videos, you've seen me talk about it before. But those are my thoughts about Katisha, Javen, and Demola. I think that ultimately she made the right decision in terms of going where she was actually going to put in some effort and feel a bit more comfortable. I hope that that experience with Javen was the final straw in her recognizing that following that emotionally unavailable or mysterious person is not going to get her the results that she's wanting for a long-term commitment. Ultimately, I hope that being able to watch that back is such a good form of therapy, because how often are we able to actually see ourselves on camera and see what the other person is saying when we're not around? It's a very unique experience, I think, that can help her really solidify a change in behavior. I don't think she would have had that experience if she would have went with Demola. I think she would have always been thinking about Javen in the back of her mind and wondering, what things would have been like with him. And I think that ultimately, she never would have been able to give Demola back the energy that he was giving her, because she just wasn't ready for it. I don't think she was healed enough to be able to really receive a person's love in the way that Demola wanted to love on her. So those are my thoughts about Katisha, Demola, and Javen. What are your thoughts? Does this align with what you were thinking? Do you have other theories as to why things unfolded the way that they did, or how things would have unfolded if she would have moved forward with Demola? I love to know your perspectives. I appreciate you guys for watching this video. I ask that you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and if you find it educational or entertaining, to send it to someone else that might find it useful as well. Again, if you'd like to try Babbel, please use the link in my description box for 55% off. I appreciate you for watching this video all the way until the end. You didn't have to, but the fact that you did helps me out so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you.